Okay, I just pulled this bin out, and I don't know if you can see, but there's little mites all over it. This is the first time in a long time I've seen any mites on my bin. Now, if you look at this, it says Reds from Mark. That was a friend of mine. Started Friday, June 3rd, 22, 6:30 p.m. Don't ask me why I did that. Paper, cardboard, peat, 1/4 cup manure. So that's all these guys were given. This was a startup bin, and oh lordy, we got a science project. Look at this mold. Now, folks, this don't look so good. This is not good. It's mold, absolute mold, but worms like mold. So I am thinking, so I started this up on June 3rd. Today's June 22nd. So it's been 19 days, and I started this bin, and I don't normally feed a bin the first time. And apparently that was a little bit too long. So I have water here, and I'm going to wash my hands. I was going to say go let me find some gloves before I tinker with this mold, but you know what? I'm not afraid of mold. I'm not eating it, so I don't mind touching it. Let's just see what's going on. That's why there's mites. This is an absolute unhealthy bin. Now, do you see all these bugs? Now, the person I got these worms from, he's a friend of mine. He does his worms very, very different. And when I got them, they were full of a lot of bug problems, not mites, a lot of bugs. And I won't go into that. But his worms are pretty awesome despite that. And I took the worms, I washed them, literally took the castings away, put it in an outside bin, washed the worms. But I guess there were mite eggs in there. But look at this. Despite what you saw at the top, look at these reds. Look at them. They're in the mold. They're making castings. Look at how beautiful these reds are, by the way. I love Mark's worms. Love them. Don't love his process. It's not for me. Won't knock it because it works well for him. But, I mean, these are reds, folks. These are beautiful, beautiful reds. It's just not a system that I think is the way I want to do things. But his worms are beautiful. And, you know, I asked him for some worms, and I gave him a bunch of my Africans so we could experience what each other has, because his worms come from a very different stock. So now that I'm getting down lower, there's moisture. And yes, there's still mold on the edges here. We're going to knock that in. And there's mites. There's moisture. And there's actually too much. Now, here's a potato. It doesn't even look like they've eaten this potato. It's mushy. It's rotten. But I don't see any evidence of the worms attacking it. They're all in the corner with the mold. Ooh, that stinks. Ooh, don't break open the rotten potato. That wasn't a smart decision on my part. So I don't even remember adding the potato. I guess I didn't add that to the cardboard. But these worms are so healthy. Mark, your worms are awesome right now. They're doing great. I don't want the mites. You can have them back, but... And I gave them mold. Or you gave me mold. I don't know, Mark. So, this is 20 days since I started this bin. And I obviously added a potato, but nothing else other than cardboard. Oh, I just put my hand in another potato. Okay. So, remember... on the bin I did the, if you haven't watched it yet, it's the Lumbricus rubellus. I said that I went along and added 3 potatoes to each of my bins because I had a bag of potatoes that went rotten. Doesn't look like they've eaten much of this, but dang, the worms are healthy. Oh, look at the black lines along the back of some of these. It's pretty cool, huh? Yeah, the bin is pretty gross. It's dry on top, wet on the bottom, and they haven't eaten much, but they're thriving. I honestly think, this is just my opinion, Mark, let me know, the way he raises his worms, which is different than me, has made them adapt to a different type of lifestyle and environment. So adding the stuff that I add to mine routinely, I think is an adjustment for them, even though, you know, it's, I mean, they're still reds, but I mean, look at this. And this, by the way, was exactly, it was 7.7 ounces. It was a half a pound. I remember because he was joking with me, like, look, I gave you a pound of reds. And just jokingly, I said, it looks like a half a pound to me. So I weighed them after I got everything off them, and it was 7 pounds, 7 ounces. But they look really, really good. They like mold. Okay, so they made their own mold. Mike, you got mold worms. They have not eaten these potatoes. It's like they're not in them. These potatoes reek, but that's what happens with rotten potatoes. So, again, worm bin problems. You just saw this. The top was covered in mold. There are mites. I have some dolomite lime down here, so that'll take care of that. The worms on the same shelf with it in other bins, I've already checked. There was no evidence of any mites. So they navigate towards what attracts them. And in this bin, it's probably the amount of decaying food. And perhaps I made it too moist. I did that intentionally because his worms are raised in a very, very wet environment. And when I was at his house, the container he took these worms from that I helped him harvest was wet, anaerobic, sour, and very unpleasant in smell. But the worms were thriving. So there is no one way to do it right, guys. There's a lot of ways to do it right. And, you know, even though Mark's method isn't for me, I won't put it down one bit because it works for him, and the castings he ultimately gets grow amazing stuff. So I told him I would do updates on this. So yeah, so we're 19 days in from a fresh, brand new bed, and you can see, despite the fact that they haven't eaten their potatoes, they've made a lot of castings. So that was in 3 weeks. And what I told Mark is that I can assure you, and I looked at what he generally puts in his buckets for quantity. I said, I can assure you that in my type of container, the way I raise my worms, they will finish a bin faster than what I consider the laborious effort that he puts into. It's a lot more work and it's a lot more time, and he thinks it results in castings quicker. So I did this to show him that while his method works great, it doesn't need to be as labor intensive to get castings fast. But gosh, these worms are beautiful. They are beautiful. Sorry, it looks like you're out of focus here. I hate having to be in a basement. Go to the basement. Okay. Well, that's it. So again, you saw a horrible, moldy, disgusting, dry top. And then as soon as I stirred it in, look at these reds. They didn't suffer a bit. If anything, they got bigger. So I'm going to add, what am I going to add? They don't need food. It doesn't look like they need bedding. They don't need grit. They definitely don't need moisture. I'm going to put a little bit of my natural bedding on top of this just to cut down on the odor of the rotten potatoes that I've now smashed, because the smell is in the air and carbon kills odors or absorbs odors. So if I cover it, it's gone. And I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of dolomite lime that I have some powdered dolomite lime. You can see it here. It's not the granules, it's completely floured. And that gets rid of the mites because it adjusts the pH level that attracts the mites. There's two things that attract mites: excessive green foods or a pH out of whack. Based on the mold, the way the potatoes looked, and the smell, the pH is out of whack. And that's okay because it's very easy to correct. So a little bit of lime, a little bit of bedding on top, close it up, and in another 3 weeks, and I'm going to mark the date on here right now when I need to check it, this bin will be done and Mark will see. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.